Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com, and WeissAdvice here on YouTube. Is the U87 from Neumann microphones the greatest microphone of all time, or is it cheap, overrated crap? I've seen both ideas espoused online, and I'd like to take a second to answer that. I have been recording for 23 years. I have used a U87 many, many times. In fact, I am speaking into one right now. This is my Neumann U87. I am also speaking into a JZ Black Hole microphone, and I have both up for comparison because they are pretty different sounding microphones. I think it will help to demonstrate some points. Okay, so where does the idea that the U87 is the greatest microphone of all time come from? Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure, but I'm going to maybe venture some guesses. The first is that the Neumann line in general was originally designed to be really solid workhorse microphones. From the original U47s to the U67 to the U87, they were designed to just generally sound good and be functional, and actually were not particularly expensive when they first came out. And so the U87 in particular, being a solid state version of the U67, that was a really ubiquitous microphone. It was less expensive, it was easier to maintain, and it generally sounds pretty good on everything. So U87s got used on a lot of records. A lot of the sounds that we grew up with, a lot of the things that we came to know and love, sonically speaking, were originally recorded with U87s, not necessarily because the 87 was the greatest microphone, but because it was the available microphone that produced good results. Now, where is the idea coming from that it is a crap microphone? Well, it's a counterculture thought, I think, to the idea that the U87 is so great. The pendulum is swinging, and maybe swinging a little bit back in the other direction too far. Because some people are suggesting the U87 is the best microphone in the world, the expectation that it would be the best microphone compared to the actual reality of it makes it seem like it's a lot worse than it really is. In my personal opinion, again, owning one and using one many, many times, I think that U87s are really good microphones. They are very solid. They will not let you down, but they are rarely the best microphone for any given job. So, I have recorded some phrases here on both the U87 and also the JZ Black Hole, and we're going to compare a couple of things that might kind of illustrate some of the differences we can expect, because ultimately the most important thing when picking a microphone isn't how good the microphone is, it's how well it's going to work for what we're recording and trying to do. All right, let's pop on in. So, I've got three ideas here. The top test, where I'm saying she sells seashells by the seashore. The low end test, where I'm saying Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. And the mid test, where I'm saying Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. And this will give us a good idea of what to listen for in terms of the overall frequency response. So let's play down a little bit of the U87. Testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. She sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Where did he put them? Yeah, that's my brilliant performance. So what am I hearing? Well, first of all, I would describe the U87 here as a slightly dark and mid-focused microphone. My voice happens to be particularly distinct in the nose range. One might even possibly suggest that I have a slightly nasal voice. And so my voice already provides a lot of energy in the 800 to 1.5K kind of a range. And I think that that's what the U87 is bringing out for the most part. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. You can hear I sound a little bit stuffy, particularly on the mid-range take. She sells seashells by the seashore. Once I start using the sibilance test, that's when things start to even out a little bit, because this U87, it is almost 30 years old, is maybe a little bit darker than like a U87 that would have been made last year, but in general, it's a fairly balanced top end to begin with anyway. It doesn't really exaggerate the top. And then when we check the plosives, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. It stays pretty neutral. It handles the plosives pretty darn well at a reasonable distance, and here I'm at about maybe a foot and change. There's also a certain distinct saturation that shows up. There's kind of three ranges of saturation. There's the low saturation that you'll find in almost every Neumann microphone. It's like sort of a identifying Neumann sound. I can usually pick out if a microphone was a Neumann microphone because of a saturation quality in the lows. There's also a distinct 87-ish, 87-ishness. There we go. That happens in the mid-range, and I think that a lot of rap artists like this because that saturation and exaggeration pulls the voice forward. It's very easy to get a vocal to the front of the mix just because that range tends to sound forward to us, and even if we're cutting that range, the saturation that's there keeps things sounding forward, which is a very important detail. And then there's a top-end saturation that I would say kind of sounds a little grainy, if I'm being honest. Now, I'm going to compare this to the JZ Black Hole, which again is probably one of the most different sounding microphones that's still a large diaphragm condenser in terms of how it sounds versus the U87. So this is the JZ Black Hole. Testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. She sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Where did he put them? So I'm going to play the sibilance test next to the U87 real quick. Here's the 87. She sells seashells by the seashore. Here's the JZ Black Hole. She sells seashells by the seashore. These are level matched in terms of actual amplitude, but the JZ sounds a lot louder because it has a lot more top end. It's got maybe like 7 or 8 dB more top end than my particular U87, and probably somewhere between 5 to 6 dB more top end in comparison to a more up-to-spec 87. So it's a significantly brighter microphone, but there are some other qualities that I want to point out. The mid-range does not have nearly the same saturation going on. It is a much cleaner mid-range. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not a good thing or a bad thing. This is just part of the sound of the microphone. It is cleaner in the mids. So I'm going to play the U87, and then I'm going to play the JZ, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. What I'm going to do now is play the 87 again, but this time I'm going to EQ it here to sound more like the Black Hole. So I'm taking up a bunch of top end, and I'm cutting a little bit of mids, and it's going to sound like this. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. Now here's the JZ. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. You'll notice that even when EQ'd, the 87 still retains that mid-range saturation, and so it makes the microphone sound a little bit bolder and more forward in this particular case. Even though I'm cutting mids, I'm lowering the overall gain here is coming down 0.3 dB. The 900 hertz is coming down 0.7 dB, and 2K is coming down 2 dB. So I'm mostly cutting, although I do have a top-end boost. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. That mid-range on the 87 still holds up even while I'm cutting, and I think that that's a very useful characteristic of a microphone, particularly one that's being used on vocals, so I do like it for vocals. Some engineers don't like it as much. They don't like that forward mid-range. I do. We also hear that there is that grain that's showing up in the top end. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. She sells seashells by the seashore. Black Hole. She sells seashells by the seashore. Super crystal clear. 87. She sells seashells by the seashore. Ever so slightly hashy. Not bad by any stretch. I think it sounds good. It just isn't quite as clear. There is a little bit of that grain. I tend to not like that so much for vocals, but it's just, again, a characteristic we want to be aware of. Now, another characteristic that I want to point out, which is really, really important, is the off-axis response. And I'll explain why that's important in a second, but I'm going to now play the U87 off-axis. Off-axis cardioid response. Off-axis cardioid response. She sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. And you can hear that it sounds almost like there's a low-pass filter going on. If we compare that over to the original capture, Mommy made me mash my M&Ms. She sells seashells by the seashore. Off-axis cardioid response. She sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. You can hear that there's some filter, like a filtery quality that's going on, and that's important to recognize. Now, I'm going to play the Jay-Z off-axis. Off-axis cardioid response. She sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Here, we can hear the sound really getting stuffed into that nose range. The off-axis response of the 87, while not like amazing, to me does sound a little bit better than the Jay-Z Black Hole, as it retains a little bit more of the overall frequency balance. Neither, again, are great, but just pointing out that difference. Now, why does that matter? Well, when we're recording certain sources that have composite sound, meaning we're picking up different parts of an instrument, say an upright bass, we're going to have the actual fundamental tones coming from the F hole, we're going to have the brighter harmonics coming off of the bridge, but we're also going to have a lot of the pluck sounds coming from the neck, coming from where the finger pluck is occurring. Same thing with acoustic guitars. We're picking up sound from the bridge, from the neck, and from the sound hole. And so when we're using a microphone to pick up something that has a wider range of composite sounds, our off-axis response is going to determine largely whether or not we get a better representation of that sound. With a face, all of the sound is basically coming from more or less here, maybe down here, but it's not more than maybe like a foot. So we don't really need to have a very wide off-axis response in order to get a good representation of a voice. In fact, sometimes a narrower response is actually better because we might want to be trying to eliminate some room. But if we're playing something like an acoustic guitar, we're probably going to get a better sound from something that picks up the off-axis information a little bit nicer. Overall, what's my take? Is the U87 the holy grail of microphones? No, definitely not. It's a solid workhorse microphone that will sound good in most situations and is very usable. I've had one for years. This is probably the first time you've ever seen one in one of my videos, because I don't like how it sounds on my voice particularly. I think that the Jay-Z sounds better for my voice, and I think that I have several other microphones that sound better for my voice. But for another voice, well, it might be ideal. For another instrument, it might be ideal. However, I do believe that most of the hype around the U87 is the Neumann brand name. They do make great microphones, but I think that there are alternate microphones that could be better for particular sources, or just better in general for a better price point, and I think that that's worth pointing out. All right, guys. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification so you get notified. And lastly, you know what we say, we are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.